we should honor our time by starting on time. Uh, my name's Henry Sokolsky. Most of you know me, but uh, we've got a really unique group of people here. Uh, we had a conversation with the presenter. It's really quite impressive. You should take a look at the bio. The method of this gathering is somewhat simple. I have a project that I'm undertaking for the U.S. Department of Defense, and it took quite a while to get it off the ground. And it has to do with trying to understand the vulnerability of electrical supply systems. Now, I put in for this grant, I don't know, easily. It got started approximately 2 or 3 years ago. Now, part of the problem, of course, is America has a rather hesitant view of defense spending, and so we don't really appropriate in a regular fashion. We have continuing resolutions which don't allow for new starts. So that's part of the explanation for why it took so long to get this thing going. But there was another explanation, and I think it's the one we need to be thinking about, each of us. And it was, well, you can't possibly engage in a serious investigation of the vulnerability of a supply system that's civil because the electrical supply system and its vulnerability is a very sensitive topic that should be, treated with classification and is, and therefore, if you try to do an unclassified study, you won't learn anything, and you can't possibly do anything to add value. Why should we fund it? I said, well, first of all, I'm not sure it's true that we can't add value. And second of all, even if it was, you've got a problem. And the problem is this: the electrical supply system is, to say nothing of, I don't know, gas supply systems, other civil infrastructures, are coming under attack. You do not have to be a conspiracy theorist to understand or believe that this is so. You can read about things like the Chinese cyber attacks called Typhoon Volt. You can, if you bother, even in English, you can read about what's going on in Europe, where, the Russians are overflying reactors with military drones. Cables are being cut. All kinds of threats are being made. And then there's something that's just plain simple. It's Ukraine. Now, you don't have to theorize or conspiracy theorize about what's going on there. It's quite clear what's going on there. The infrastructure is being bombarded, not just cyber attacked. Well, we might be next. Certainly our allies are worried, and they're worried in East Asia. Okay, so if you have a problem and it has to do with a public utility system, you need a public narrative to explain what that threat is and some semblance of an explanation of what you're doing to protect it. And if you don't, you're not going to have the public when you need them to make any of your preparations work. Well, they like that explanation. They funded the project. I don't see public activity and meetings about this. That's what this is. I'd like to think, arguably, it's one of the first. It needs not to be the last. It's my hope that this meeting will spark an interest in holding other meetings elsewhere, multiple times, at various levels, in the public. So it's in that spirit that we're meeting. And Mariana was very willing and generous in trying to secure today's speaker. And I'm really honored that we're doing this not just as NPEC, but we're doing it with the Belfer Center, which, is a brand name people can recognize. Okay, good. let's get going. Mariana, why don't you do the introduction?
All right. Well, thank you so much, Henry, for starting us off. I'm Mariana Bujarin. I'm a senior research associate with the project on managing the atom at the Belfer Center. I apologize for my voice. I'm just coming out of the flu, but hopefully we can pull through this. It is my um, explicit honor to introduce today's speaker, Mr. Volodymyr Kudrytskyi, who served as the CEO and chairman of the management board of Ukrainian grid operator Ukrenergo. He started in February 2020 and persisted in this role until September 2024, so just recently. So that gives you an idea that it was under Mr. Kudrytskyi's leadership, under his management and purview, that Ukraine basically encountered this attack against its grid, its critical infrastructure. And also in that time, Ukrenergo was able to disconnect right in the beginning of the war, disconnect its grid from the Russia-Belarus grid and connect it after a series of tests, passing them with flying colors to the European grid. So we welcome Mr. Kudrytskyi here to learn from his experience. We asked him to prepare some remarks, but really this is for us to discuss in a very open manner. Ask Mr. Kudrytskyi's questions. Since we're a small group, please raise your virtual hand. After Mr. Kudrytskyi's remarks, I'll have some questions of my own as well. But as Henry introduced this topic, this is certainly Ukraine's experience has implications far beyond Ukraine and also far beyond Europe. These are global issues, and we're looking forward to learn from Mr. Kudrytskyi. So without further ado, over to you.
Hello again, and good morning. It's actually evening in Ukraine now, and I have the lights on in my office, which signals that we managed to temporarily recover from the recent attacks, massive attacks that were undertaken by Russians. And indeed, I had honor to lead the national grid operator in Ukraine, electricity grid operator in Ukraine. And I had 2 periods of my chairmanship in that company. First, easy 2 years during COVID crisis, and more challenging 2 years, more than 2 years during full-scale invasion. So basically, I haven't experienced like relaxed times at Ukrenergo, because I started with COVID and then a much more challenging crisis with the Russian invasion. 4 hours before invasion started, we disconnected the last 750 kilovolt line connecting Ukrainian Sumy city with Russian Kursk nuclear power plant. And Ukrainian power system started to operate in island mode because we were preparing at the time for future synchronization of Ukrainian power grid with Europe. And that this process is very complicated, very lengthy, as you probably understand and aware. And we had to pass the test, 3-day island mode operation test, to prove to Europeans that Ukrainian power grid is resilient enough to be to have this honor to be connected safely to continental network. And it may be even a little bit surprising to say about resilience of Ukrainian power grid in 2025. But at that time, there were some hesitations from European side that such an interconnection could technically take place. And we had to prove the concept, so to say. And we disconnected on 24th of February 1:32 a.m. It was a night, and I witnessed for 3 hours how the system was operating, and I went home to have sleep. And 30 minutes after that, I heard first bombings and first missile attacks by Russians. And of course, since then, Ukrainian power system has experienced biggest missile and drone campaign in human history. More than 2,000 ballistic and cruise missiles and probably more than 10,000 kamikaze drones were launched at less than 100 objects in Ukrainian power grid. Ukrainian power system has only 15 to 20 big sources of power, including 3 nuclear power plants, and Soviet built thermal and hydropower plants. So it's a hugely centralized system if we speak about generation, and around 80 transmission substations that were operated by us, national grid operator. We also have around 30,000 distribution level substations which are not attacked because of their small size, and they are low value target for Russians, obviously. So they concentrated all these thousands of missiles and drones at very specific less than 100 objects. And since the invasion start, they ruined or damaged severely more than 1/2 of country's generation fleet and virtually every transmission substation. There are some substations operated by Ukrenergo, the national grid operator, which were damaged by missiles and drones more than 30 times. And these substations are still in operation. They are still transmitting energy. So there were 2 stages of this campaign. Before October 2022, Russians just occasionally shelled electric infrastructure on the territories which were on the front line. So there was no kind of well thought and well planned campaign against Ukrainian electricity system. It was just occasional shelling. When Ukraine deoccupied few regions and many territories in Kiev, Kharkiv, and other areas, Russians in September, October started planned campaign, and their target was to shut down completely Ukrainian power system during winter period of time. So their strategy was, because they were losing at that time in the front line, they tried to break the electricity network, which is the most critical type of all type of infrastructure. And in fact, they wanted to create this humanitarian catastrophe so that the front line would collapse. They wanted to freeze supplies to the front line because you don't have in the real world, in this big war, you don't have the strict division between military and civilian end of the society. They are closely interconnected, closely integrated. For your millions of troops in the front line to be able to fight with adversary, they need to have fuel supplies, ammunition supplies, they need to have food supplies and many other things that can only come from civilian infrastructure and civilian economy. So their plan was in September, October, November, and December 2022 to create such a big oscillation in electric network to make it collapse, to initiate full blackout of the system for a lengthy period of time, so that water supply and heating systems would be frozen and millions of civilians would be in situation without any supply of heat, water, so it would be a huge humanitarian catastrophe, and Ukraine would surrender, not because it would lose on the front line, but because the civil life would be ended in this territory.